Antarctica could well be our most vital barometer of global change in the 21st century. It's almost the only corner of our world not yet overrun by humanity. So changes here cannot be caused by the factory around the corner. There isn't one. They must reflect global change. We're already keenly studying changes in the ice, but look deeper, and there's a second layer of sophistication to this barometer: Antarctic life. Because life there is balanced on a knife edge. By watching what thrives and what dies on Antarctica, we may learn as much about our changing planet as we can from studying the melting ice. Traveling on Seamaster, a state-of-the-art ice-breaking expedition vessel, America's Cup legend, Sir Peter Blake, wants to wake people up to what's happening.
And if we can get people interested in the environment, then in love with the environment, maybe then we've got a chance that they'll want to protect what they actually are interested or in love with. We want to get our message across using adventure, excitement, a bit of danger, going places with this extraordinary vessel of ours that most other vessels can't go.
They're heading for the southwestern corner of the Antarctic Peninsula to explore the George VI Sound. They will try to reach 70 South, further south than any vessel has penetrated up the Sound before, because the ice there is crumbling fast, opening up unexplored waters to study, both above the surface and below. The shortest route to Antarctica is from South America, and that's where the expedition begins, in the most southerly city on the planet, Ushuaia, Argentina. This will be their last contact with civilization for at least 3 months, and if they get trapped by the ice, a lot longer.
We have to be totally self-contained on this vessel. We have to be able to look after ourselves in every respect. What happens if we get caught in the ice? We're going to be there until next January, perhaps another 9 months. We have to have food on board for 9 months. We've got to have enough toilet paper, tea, and all those things.
First Mate Ollie is one of the most experienced diving experts in the world.
On and upward.
He's seen our bad housekeeping firsthand.
We're trying to show people the environment as it should be. I've seen too many places around the world what damage man can do to the environment.
Top yachtsman Alistair, the youngest crew member, is checking over the mechanical systems one more time. Where they're going is a long, long way from home.
It's just so vast, so pure and untouched and inhospitable.
As for ex-US Navy SEAL Mark, it's the lure of the legendary crystal-clear Antarctic waters that draws him.
The holy grail for diving is water so deep, so blue, that the only limiting factor is purely the physics of light penetrating water.
The morning of departure is calm and still. It's 1,000,000 miles from the fame and adulation that Peter gained, winning the America's Cup not once, but twice. He's won just about every major long-haul yacht race in the world and sailed the equivalent of 25 times around the globe. He's won the Whitbread Round the World race and smashed the Jules Verne non-stop circumnavigation record. He's one of the greatest sailors of our age. Now, he's given up the ticker-tape parades to become a special envoy to the United Nations Environmental Programme and travel to the pulse points of our world and check on its health. And after all the preparation, it's time for his new challenge to begin.
You can always find things to do on a boat. We could be sitting here in Ushuaia for another 6 months and we'd still be mucking around. It's time, we've got to get out of here, and we're looking forward to it. I mean, it's a real adventure. Here we go.
Romance on the dock.
Thank you.
Ahead of them lies a dangerous and beautiful world of ice and storms. It's going to be quite a trip.
I want people to follow us because it's going to be an adventure. We have to cross Great Passage from the bottom of South America to the Antarctic Peninsula, one of the wild areas of the world, with a great bunch of people. And we're going to have some fun doing it.
The lure of Antarctica for ship's cook Jackie is 1 million miles from the pragmatic responsibilities of turning out 3 square meals a day.
But it's sort of an enchanted place, I think. And it's sort of eerie, it's special, one cannot describe it.
Above and below the surface, the oceans are as familiar to Jeannot as his own backyard. He's worked on everything, from nuclear submarines to classic sailing ships. And going to Antarctica is as much a mission for him as it is for Peter.
It's the most beautiful reason to come and try to show it to the people, because we need to protect such a thing.
Their journey will take them from the southern tip of South America and out across the mighty Southern Ocean, reaching the frozen continent at the northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. Pete is no stranger to the legendary ferocity of this part of the world. It's an unforgiving place, even for the most experienced sailors.
The Southern Ocean is a big place. The whole bottom part of the world is just ocean. Awful weather, much of the time. Cold, no help available. Lots and lots of ships and seamen were lost there.
Understanding the weather in the Southern Ocean can be the difference between life and death. Down below, communications expert Don has the latest weather information, and they pick painstakingly through it. They're entering a part of the world that sees gales on more than 200 days in every year, where winds may reach up to 120 miles per hour, and waves may be as high as the masts on the Seamaster herself. This part of the world is mad, bad, and dangerous to know, and it's all because of Antarctica's location at the bottom of the world.
Africa, India, New Zealand, South America, and Antarctica originally formed one supercontinent called Gondwana land. Then 180 million years ago, this began to break up. And by 30 million years ago, Antarctica was completely isolated by the newly formed Southern Ocean. And everything changed. This is the part of the world where powerful depressions form, bringing strong winds and bad weather. With no land to stop them anymore, they marched eastwards around the globe, ring-fencing Antarctica and circulating powerful ocean currents. Warmer northern waters could no longer penetrate easily into this current. Antarctica was now isolated, and the ice began to form.
But even the stormiest ocean in the world takes a day off now and again. Peter and Don's careful analysis of the weather has paid dividends. Hourglass dolphins, the most southerly in the world, join them on the calm waters, swimming under Seamaster's bow. The first order of business is to measure the water temperature. Amazingly, this plastic bucket is a critical component of the ship's navigation, because as long as the water remains at about 5 degrees, they're not yet in Antarctic waters, and they know the risk of collision with a berg is slight. Down below, it's fresh water that is causing headaches. The water maker, the only source of fresh water aboard, has failed. Jeannot is desperately trying to fix it. Water is their most precious resource.
The fresh water is life. That's the motto of Lake Expedition. No water, no life. So you can spend days without eating, but after a few days without drinking, you're dead.
Halfway across the Drake Passage, the skies cloud over and the sea color changes dramatically from blue to slate gray, and the water temperature plummets. Real caution is now vital. Any crew member falling in this water would only survive for a couple of minutes before hypothermia killed him. This region, where warm northern and cold southern waters meet, is called the convergence line. It's a vital part not only of the Antarctic ecosystem, but of the whole planet's. Isolated by wind-blown surface currents, warmer northern waters cannot mix with icy Antarctic waters. When the oceans freeze on the edge of the continent itself, they make the cold ocean below saltier and denser. This cold, dense water sinks to the sea floor and flows north, cooling tropical and subtropical oceans across the globe. It's a vital part of the Earth's thermostat. Less sea ice could mean unpredictable consequences for the climate across our whole world. Taking full advantage of the conditions, the ship pushes on non-stop, day and night. It's 11 p.m., and as Seamaster sails into the night, it's Don's turn on watch. Despite the benign conditions, there's no room for complacency. As the ship powers south, there's an entirely new hazard ahead: icebergs.
We've got ice reports of bergs down here 20 miles square that are currently floating off in the direction of South Georgia. The greater problems are going to be actually seeing of an iceberg, and so I guess for the hours of darkness, which may only be 3 or 4, we could have a major problem in visibility with the naked eye. But we've got radar here, which we trust and hope that the berg is visible big enough, we'll pick it up.
The problem is that small, rock-hard bergs, called growlers, can hide from the radar in the ocean swells. At least they'll be visible by day. But the next morning, the ship finds itself engulfed in fog. Warm, damp air blowing down from the north across the icy water makes this a hazard familiar to all Antarctic travelers. Somewhere, out in the mist, are treacherous bergs. It's like trying to avoid land, but this land is moving, its position uncertain. All watertight doors are shut. No one on board wants to discover the Titanic experience firsthand. The pressure is on forward lookout Mark to warn them. But in a world of white cloud and white fog, white bergs are hard to spot. Though they can see little ahead, the first signs of Antarctic life warn them that land is close by.
No visual ice, a lot of penguins jumping out of the ocean, so I think we're picking them up on the radar, over.
Penguin Island. Position approximate. Just here, right?
Oh, those guys there, right.
As they push tentatively south, the fog finally lifts, and they find themselves in waters thick with titanic bergs.
This is Iceberg Alley, a shooting gallery of bergs. Big here means 1 million tons or more. These colossal blocks of ice are ejected into the sea from great ice sheets, some larger than the whole United Kingdom. Now these bergs are gradually melting away to join the waters from which they sprang before human civilization had even begun. This ice may be tens or even hundreds of thousands of years old. Extraordinary.
Finally, Antarctica hoves into view. It is quite as incredible as everyone aboard hoped. The waters teeming with amazing life. Man has never had more than a token presence here, the coldest, windiest, most hostile place on Earth. In parts of the continent, temperatures can plunge to nearly -90 centigrade, and wind speeds top 200 miles per hour. 70% of all the fresh water on the entire planet is locked up here in eternal blocks of ice. But in the window of Antarctic summer, there is a tiny thaw on the fringes of the continent. And it's more than enough to solve Seamaster's most pressing problem.
Filling these 7 20-litre containers we've got with water. Water's flowing off the ice up here. There's a nice bigger flow that goes through the penguin colony that you wouldn't want to drink. This looks like pure, clean drinking water, and it's to fill our tanks up, basically.
Here it comes.
Nice little nose, sort of penguin of 2001 with a slight hint of albatross.
Had a bit of seal thrown in.
A bit of seal thrown in as well.
Here come the water boys, mate.
The water boys.
That didn't take you long.
This is their most precious resource, and it will take them all day to transport the 3 tons needed to top up the tanks.
Bloody H2O.
Coming at you, you know.
As Antarctic summer takes hold, temperatures on the coastline creep just above freezing, and life down here seizes the moment to reproduce, to fatten up, and to prepare for bitter winter. And for explorers, summer unlocks the ice-choked seas, providing the perfect opportunity to visit this strange world. But even at its chilly best, Antarctica is a dangerous place for tropical animals like us. Seamaster provides the crew's essential environmental cocoon against Antarctica's dangerous beauty. She is as much a part of the team as any of her crew. Even in summer, the weather here can't be trusted. Sudden changes in wind and currents may sweep in pack ice that can trap and crush a ship. But Seamaster is not just any ship. This is what she was made for. Below the water, her hull is shaped like a dish. So if the ice does close around her, she will be squeezed up on top of it, not crushed. Anything that might get trapped, like her keels and her twin rudders, can be retracted into the hull. Even her propellers are protected in caged tunnels. She is one strong boat. It's hard to believe that disaster could strike on a beautiful day like this. But Ernest Shackleton's famous ship, Endurance, one of the strongest of its time, was crushed and utterly destroyed by the vice-like pressure of the frozen sea. And he was just on the other side of the peninsula at almost the same time of year as Seamaster. Antarctica leaves no room for complacency. With their water problems sorted, Peter is keen to get a first close-up look at the natives. And on a small piece of floating berg, they find their first crab-eater seals. Despite their name, they don't actually eat crabs, preferring small shrimp-like creatures called krill. And it's no surprise it's the first animal they meet. There are nearly 30 million of them down here, the most abundant seals in Antarctica.
Oh, hello, mate. How are you? Aren't you lovely? Look at you. We're sorry we're on your berg. But you're welcome here as well. Aren't you beautiful? He's going to go and tell his mates. You never guess what I saw. There were big things in yellow. They're not going to believe him.
Meantime, not a murmur. Life's pretty good. Life in the fridge.
For natives like the crab eater, these are idyllic conditions, with summer temperatures soaring to just above freezing. Perfect for a seal, but potentially fatal to a human. A couple of minutes in water this brutally cold would be fatal. So just leaving the safety of Seamaster's cocoon is a major exercise.
We got these survival suits, which are sealed like a dry suit. They've got cuffs around, so they're fully sealed off from the outside environment. No water supposedly can get in, although I did leap in the water with one once and forgot to do my fly zip up and was in the water for a while wondering why I was getting so cold. So I'm ready to go to work. Onward.
Well protected, it's time for the crew to get out and see what makes this amazing place tick. For life down here, the unfrozen sea is Antarctica's great provider, where most life finds food. It makes it fundamental to Antarctica's attraction as a barometer of change. Because even in water temperatures that barely touch freezing, the sea is filled with life. But the bitter sea temperature stunts growth rates dramatically. These kelps have taken years to reach this size. Their tropical cousins would grow the same amount in a few weeks. Even these limpets grow at an agonizingly slow 0.3 millimeters per year.
And the conditions in which they live make life on the seafloor one of Antarctica's living barometers of change. The temperature is astonishingly stable, varying by only a couple of degrees over the whole year, that's summer and winter. So all these species are adapted to grow in a narrow range of temperatures. If the sea warms by even 2 or 3 degrees, it could sound the death knell for many of them.
Warming isn't the only hazard to life down here. It can't be too cold either. Not because things won't grow, but because it's vital that the ice can melt, releasing algae and nutrients buried within it. The melting ice clouds the water with algae, kick-starting the whole food chain. The first to take advantage of this food explosion are these krill, tiny shrimp-like creatures. At their peak, the total weight of krill outnumbers the total weight of humanity. They are the power lunch of Antarctica. Each one is nearly 50% pure protein. Further up the food chain, life rushes to feed on this bonanza of krill. Penguins, whales, and seals all take advantage. It's only when the ice is melting that this explosion can happen, and it's a crucial reason why the seasons are so vital and that life here is so sensitive to change. All life in Antarctica is uniquely adapted to get the most out of this frozen world, from the smallest krill to the largest whale. Every adaptation is different. Fur seals, for example, have a beautiful dense coat that makes them look almost cute, until you come face to face with them.
I'm really getting a feel for how territorial they are, and how they make you definitely respect their space, and it's no problem with me. It's fun to observe them and to see what they're like, but I'm definitely not going to push into their space at all. These guys are a lot more agile than the other ones. They're smaller in stature, but they're the hind flippers that they use to get around them. Well, this is obviously a little bit better situation here. I've actually moved back a few feet, and now he's at ease. He's over there scratching himself and comfortable, and so am I.
Quick and aggressive on land, their movements are still awkward compared with their incomparable grace in the water. When Jeannot joins them, it's hard to believe that these graceful, playful animals are the same aggressive creatures that Mark encountered ashore.
On land they are far less playful. In the water they are home. You can't feel it. In the water they are. You have to be a bit careful, but I don't feel it aggressive. Not at all. In the beginning they are a bit shy, but not for a long time. Eh? And after that, not shy at all. No more. You are integrated. You become a fossil for a while. That's good. I just play with this guy. Yeah, it's amazing. That's like playing with young dogs, you know. But you have to be a bit careful. But when they become a bit too much excited, they show the teeth. And I don't know exactly if it's a smile or or a threat. But it's very, very exciting to dance with them. Yeah.
Most Antarctic residents use layers of fat to stay warm, but not the fur seals. They have a sophisticated coat of fur. On the outside are coarse, waterproof guard hairs, but hidden below is a soft pelt that works like duck down to insulate them. Now, when man learnt how to remove the guard hairs, the fur seals were in trouble, because this pelt was both beautiful and, far more dangerously for them, fashionable.
On Half Moon Island in the South Shetland Islands, ship's historian Don discovers the whole sorry tale. In 1819, this area was home to hundreds of thousands of fur seals, until man discovered it, and the remnants of the orgy of killing that followed are still scattered about.
Well, look at this old boat. Great old piece of history here. Whaling, sealing, hunting. You know, I was reading the other day that somewhere about 1819, a guy was blown off course down here into the South Shetlands and discovered the place. First man to find it. 1821, 22 season, 40 boats came down and started sealing in earnest. 1823-24 season, 90 boats were here. And the following year, it was commercially not viable. Amazing, isn't it? Almost decimated the seal population.
In 3 years, an estimated 320,000 seal skins were taken. So insatiable was the demand that by the 1890s, fur seals were believed to have followed the dodo into extinction. But in the 1950s, a tiny colony was discovered on South Georgia, and from these few survivors, their numbers have exploded. But for a while, it was close. Very, very close. We're lucky they're still around.
Fur seals were just unlucky enough to have skins that were perfect for warm, high-fashion coats.
Well,
But fashion wasn't the only thing on the hunters' minds. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and its success was built on the slaughter of whales. The bigger, the better. This is just the jawbone of one of these creatures. It's immense.
what's that length?
7 metres exactly to here.
Good, it's gracious. So
That is
if we
big.
assume that it's about 20% of the length of the whale, that would have to make it 7 5s, a 35 metre
Metres.
whale.
Well, that has to be a blue whale, more or less, doesn't it?
Enormous. I mean, the,
Antarctic life drew the short straw because much of it uses layers of fat, blubber, to insulate it from the bitter cold. Boiling up the dead animals turned the blubber into an oil that was just perfect for lubricating the great machines and lighting the streets of expanding cities. Scenes like this are typical of what they left behind.
We're in a fairly protected little harbour here, so I think the only way really this could probably have got here is it had been winched up, and looking at the remains on one of the other shores, I think this has been a whaling base at times in the past, no doubt about it. As have most of the harbours, I think, around here. They've all been used to take as many as possible.
And the skeletons that litter the edges of the land down here are just the tip of the iceberg. It's only beneath the surface of the icy waters that the true scale of the slaughter is clear. The seafloor is littered with whale bones. In the aftermath of that gold rush, fur seals and some whale populations were decimated. It shows us graphically what happens if we use up the world's resources without a second thought. It's not a lesson that we seem to have taken on board, and we don't even have the old excuse of ignorance.
And this is what all the fuss is about. This is what they were hunting. Every year, these humpback whales migrate to Antarctica to fatten up on the summer bonanza of krill. The purpose of this spectacular display of breaching is a mystery. It may be a way of communicating or an aid to feeding. Perhaps it's just for fun. And having fun may not be the only characteristic we share with these humpbacks. They are intensely curious. It's an amazing moment for the crew as the humpbacks come over for a closer look.
I think the nice thing about it is we turned everything off, echo sounders, pumps, generator engines, and we just let them come to us, and they did, and they had a good look at us. I think that's the way to do it. I think they enjoyed it as much as we did, you know. I think that was very, very special.
Well, that was awe-inspiring. It was, you know...
You can cry, Ellie, it's okay, mate.
They were, you know, you could have just about touched them. It was phenomenal being checked out, you know, on their terms, in their turf. They concentrated where the people were. It was almost spiritual.
The weather in Antarctica can turn at the drop of a hat, and quite suddenly they find themselves caught in an icy blizzard that coats Seamaster in snow and ice. It makes the decks treacherous and the ship top-heavy. They just have to roll up their sleeves and get shoveling. Like filling with water, it's a new Antarctic chore they're just going to have to get used to.
It's not that cold, it's only -3.
They've covered nearly 1,000 miles since leaving Ushuaia and are nearly 3/4 of the way towards their goal. But the closer they get, the more hazards there are. Released by the summer thaw, bergs crowd the sea. And the biggest problem is not crashing into a berg underway, as they had feared. but when they're at anchor. Though her hull is strong, chunks of ice that stick out below the water, known as spurs, threaten to tear the anchor chain off the seafloor or damage Seamaster's rudders. The only solution is a watchful eye and the application of a little brute force.
Look at the spur down there. Keep going, Ali.
And nighttime brings no respite from the drifting bergs. One of the crew must be up on watch throughout the night, fending off vast chunks of ice that aren't so very different in weight from Seamaster herself.
It's a bit like David and Goliath, really. Me with my little toothpick. Here comes 10 tons of ice.
Every one of these bergs is gradually melting away, and as they do, fresh water flows from them into the oceans, creating yet another hazard to Antarctic navigation.
There's so much fresh water around here that it distorts all the readings, and there's freshwater layers and saltwater layers, and sometimes what you think is the bottom coming up isn't, it's just a layer of fresh water, and gives false readings.
As the bergs melt, they release fresh water, which lies above the more dense salty seawater. Where these two layers meet is called the thermocline. Now this boundary confuses the sound waves that measure our ship's depth, appearing indistinguishable from the sea floor. And when the thermocline is thin, it looks like the sea is becoming dangerously shallow, and the ship is about to run aground.
Every berg they pass seems to be not just a hazard to the ship, but home to its own resident crab-eater seals. You could easily believe that these are the laziest animals in Antarctica as they sleep away the days. But you'd be wrong. In fact, they're nocturnal hunters, and just lying there, they're actually very busy, digesting food, making the blubber that insulates them, and molting to produce coats that are in tip-top condition for winter.
This guy is a weddell seal. In summer they are doing blubber, feeding, sleeping, and getting fat for the hard time of the winter.
You don't see weddell seals ashore like this in winter, when they live beneath the fast ice. Everything about them is adapted to this life, from teeth perfect for nibbling the ice around their breathing holes, to sonar for finding these holes after diving. In fact, they have a whole armory of evolved skills, and it's this specialization that makes Antarctic life such an amazing barometer of change.
It's one of the deeper diver of the Antarctic. It can reach 600 meters of depth to get his food. He has particular skeleton, so he can resist to the big pressures at 600 meters down. His eyes are very big because there is no light at 600 meters down. He can slow his heart rate down to 5-8 pulses a minute. So he can spend a long time without breathing.
These unique abilities make the Weddells another barometer of our changing world, because the fast ice is their turf. They can make a better living out of it than other seals. But if there's less ice in the future, their advantage will be eroded. So if pack ice levels go down, we might see the number of Weddells decline.
Seals look awkward ashore, but catch them in the water and it's obvious that, just like the fur seals, it's here that they're truly in their element. That's no surprise, really, because in Antarctica, the sea is the great provider of food, and where you just have to be at your best. And that's just as true for penguins. Out of the water, they're the comical, flightless bird we're all familiar with. But see them in the water, and you realize they can still fly. Their head retracts into their body until they look like tiny torpedoes, and the wings, that seem so comical on land, allow them to propel themselves an incredible 1 meter for every single beat. Not quite so stupid looking now.
Dexterity in the water isn't the only thing that penguins share with seals. They are another living barometer of change. These adalies use the frozen sea as a platform to fish from. They're after the krill that live beneath it. Penguins such as gentoos and chinstraps prefer fish and shellfish, so the sea ice is not as important to them. It means adalies are more vulnerable to loss of sea ice caused by global change, and will not do as well as their cousins. Some scientists believe that this change is already evident. It makes success in the summer rush all the more vital.
Time is pressing on the expedition. To reach their goal before the big freeze begins, they must get moving. There's just time for one last look around the western side of the peninsula before they push south. On summer days, with temperatures hovering at a balmy 0 degrees, it's easy to forget just how brutal it can be here. Scattered along the fringes of Antarctica are abandoned huts, where men from a hardier time toughed out the winter, and all to record just how awful it can get here.
Wow. Here. Oh, look at that. What do they do in the daytime, I wonder? Oh, here we go, look at this guy here. Gale continues. Northeasterly gale. Wind died down quickly. Oh, must have been pretty lonely.
Yeah, sure.
Northerly gale. Force 10 to 11. Gale, continuously. Gales, gales.
Gale.
And more gales.
Raising young in such conditions is just too tough. Summer is their only chance. And that means these penguins are in a race against time and other species to breed and prepare themselves while the sea is unfrozen and the food is abundant. Warmth is everything to the survival of eggs and chicks, and that means finding snow-free patches in the spring thaw to nest on. But these are generally high up, far from the great provider of food, the sea. This means the adults are faced with a never-ending commute, down to the sea for food, and then a back-breaking climb up to the nesting sites to regurgitate their catch for the chicks. Over the 13-week breeding season, they will transport a staggering 30 kilos of food per chick. All this effort is justified by the crucial extra time gained for breeding. Their ceaseless commuting gradually wears deep grooves in the snow that form a penguin highway. The moment the chicks have shed their soft juvenile down, they must begin to fend for themselves. And that means plunging into the icy water. The quicker they learn to fish, the better the odds of survival for them and their parents. Adult chasing is a common preoccupation for chicks, and this behavior turns out to be a neat trick for getting the chicks wet. The adults feed them a tiny bit of food and then boat for the water. The chicks take off in hot pursuit. When the land runs out, they're usually going too fast to stop. What the chicks can't know is that the moment they entered the water, they were joining the Antarctic food chain. And they're not at the top, because lurking in the icy waters is the deadly leopard seal. They are the largest seals in Antarctica and one of its greatest predators. Females may grow to 4 meters and weigh nearly half a ton. With their powerful bodies and formidable teeth, they are a remarkable predator. If she gets hungry, somewhere nearby is a penguin that's as good as dead. To capture what happens, Ollie and cameraman Andy spend hours in the bitter cold water, waiting. The penguins hang nervously at the water's edge. Sooner or later, they must take the plunge, and the moment they do, she strikes. But the penguin is still alive. Like a cat, the leopard seal has carried it in its mouth out into the deep water and then chased it. A Gentoo penguin can travel at up to 22 miles per hour underwater, but ultimately, it's no match for the leopard. And when it's finished playing, it's time to eat. With such danger in the sea, it's a wonder the penguins go down to the water at all. But they have no choice. The sea is where the food is. They must go into the water for food, or die trying. Life down here is red in tooth and claw, with a delicate balance between the hunter and the hunted, between freezing and melting. So finely tuned is life to these extremes that the global changes that appear to be gripping our planet will be easy to spot in the behavior and survival of this remarkable living world. Changes in the temperature, in the length of the seasons, could overturn these finely tuned evolutionary strategies. It isn't only the animals that depend on the summer thaw. Seamaster must continue to push south if they're to reach the melting ice sheet before things begin to cool off and their route becomes blocked, or they're trapped by the freezing sea. They've now reached beyond 66 degrees south, right on the edge of the Antarctic Circle, and more than 1,100 miles from their starting point in Ushuaia. Their goal is tantalizingly close, but things are beginning to get a lot tougher.
We just passed Cat and Dog Islands. We're coming into the Harrison Channel. Whether we're going to get through the Harrison Channel is another matter, because looking ahead with the binoculars, it looks choked with ice. It can make you a bit nervous. We're in a great vessel, but you still have to be mindful of a big piece of ice is going to make a hole in this boat as much as any other vessel. And so it gently does it. We've slowed right down at the moment. We're just doing about 4 knots. Getting a bit tight down here. It looks like a lot of bergs stuffed into the channel. But it's worth it for this. I mean, God, it's the truth. This is why we've come here, actually. Unbelievable scenery. Just amazing.
But as Peter feared, the floating ice gets denser and they find the only good anchorage blocked by it. As they push the final 400 miles south towards their ultimate goal, they'll have to contend with poor anchorages, gigantic bergs, ferocious and unpredictable winds, and the ever-present risk of becoming trapped. Nobody said it would be easy. In the next program, as Seamaster and her crew fight their way south into an alien world, they witness a ferocious and savage battle for survival never before seen by man. Beneath the ice, they unearth the hidden secrets of Antarctica's explosion of life. But will they ultimately reach 70 degrees south?